Hello and welcome to Jason Cavness Experience. I'm your host, Jason Cavness. The Jason Cavness Experience is brought to you by Cavness HR. At Cavness HR, we deliver HR to companies with 49 or fewer people. Our guest today is Marsha Mavunkel. Marsha, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, first I want to start off, for you, a blast from the past, right? So this picture here, you said it was taken back in 2011, and where is this at?
Yeah, this is, I think it's about 2010 or 11, might have been 2010. It's in Costa Rica.
Okay. So
And
I had no clue that had volcanoes in Costa Rica.
yeah, I mean, such beautiful natural sort of areas. And I was lucky enough to spend about 3 or 4 months there. This was just after or shortly after I graduated from law school in 2000. I graduated
So
2009,
this
and
was
it
like
was
a kind of reward for yourself, like a graduation present to yourself.
No, I mean there was a lot of fun, and I definitely got to see a lot of the beaches and spent every weekend traveling around. But actually, in about I think this was February 2010, I accepted a visiting professional position at the UNHCR in San Jose. And so I actually went down there to work. It was a volunteer position, but I spent about 3 months working there and living in San Jose. And every weekend we would go do things like go to the cloud rainforest and visit volcanoes, spend some time on the beaches, and go dancing in San Jose. And it was fun. It was a really interesting time. Uh, 2009 was the recession,
Yeah.
right? So it was
One of the many recessions we've had.
yeah,
Absolutely.
a very memorable one for me because here I am graduating from law school.
Perfect timing, right?
Yeah, like yay, ready to enter the job market, and it's the worst time possible. A lot of my colleagues that graduated, they had position, offers, and as soon as they, got close to graduation, firms were saying, well, actually maybe you should take a year and then and
Yeah.
come back to it.
Yeah. Go
We'll see how.
backpack for a year. Go discover
Right.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some lucky people were able to get sort of a portion of their, especially if they had positions at large national firms, they would say, hey, here's a half year salary, which is still pretty good when
Yeah.
you're going
Yeah.
to a big firm. Go work anywhere in the world for a nonprofit, and we'll talk in a year. And so I had this kind of really interesting, unique experience where I moved to San Jose, and it was a number of legal professionals, a lot of us new lawyers. Um, San Jose is the home of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. There's some nonprofits there that do legal advocacy work before the court. And there's the UNHCR as well in San Jose. So I lived with one of my best friends from law school who was working at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights as an intern. We also had a roommate who worked at a nonprofit that advocated and brought cases before the court, and then I was at the UNHCR, and so there was this really interesting group of professionals doing that type of work at that time, and we all sort of lived there, worked there for a time period, and and then eventually went back to wherever we were from, and so I had colleagues and friends from kind of around the world, and it was interesting. It was better than trying to job hunt at home, but I still got a really good experience. During my time at the UNHCR, I was working on like a practitioner's manual for refugee protection within the Inter-American court system, some policy kind of guidances, and some of the resolutions that the UNHCR was working on to bring before the court. And so it was a very short stint, of course. I was incredibly lucky to have made that connection. It was actually through my law school, I had done the clinic for human rights at Seattle University, and I was one of two students that was able to travel to Costa Rica. This was right after graduation, but before I took the bar exam, like which is if you're a lawyer, it's like one of the most stressful times in your life because you're just studying for the bar and you're every waking, breathing moment of your life, you're just running these exam problems in your mind but we were selected to go do a special oral argument before the Court of Human Rights with our professor. I think he's still the clinic director there, Professor Ankoviak. And we went and did a special advisory hearing, did an oral argument. I mean, here I am, a brand new, not even really a lawyer because I hadn't passed the bar exam yet, and was able to go travel. And so through that sort of experience and that connection, my professor also introduced me afterwards to the UNHCR, and said, "Hey, she's got some time. Do you need some sort of who's a visiting professional was the position title." And so yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, you're really good at this networking, meeting people, knowing people opens up all these really interesting doors and opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise.
So at this time, is it safe to assume that everyone there was like kind of idealistic in the mindset? And how was that? How do y'all feed off each other being so idealistic? How, go save the world. We're just out of college, like just rule the world. Was that kind of a mindset there? And you just fed off it and like did great things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I think, yeah, sure. We were, I'm sure, all pretty idealistic. I think we felt really passionate about the work we were doing. I mean, probably most of those people, I don't know, maybe most, but a lot of them were going back to corporate law firms, right? To firms that weren't doing that type of work. This was a interesting and unique opportunity for them to sort of put all of that education and that time and energy and for some people that the money they had at that point that they couldn't start working at the firm, but they were able to put that towards living and doing this type of work, sort of really social justice, human rights work. And so it was yeah, like I said, it was a very unique time in my life, I'm sure, and theirs as well. Some of us have stayed in contact, and through Facebook, you kind of see what everybody's doing. We've all gone different directions, but everybody's, I mean, I think that was special period of time.
And what are some other places you traveled to?
Generally, so my family's from India, so I've been to, India a lot as a child. It's been some time now, but that was sort of a, summer, winter break sort of trip that we would take. My family also is in Germany, so we used to go to Germany a lot.
What part of Germany?
So my family, my parents actually immigrated to Germany from India to Frankfurt.
Okay.
Initially. Before.
So as an army, I was in Würzburg a couple of years. I was in Wiesbaden, right outside of Frankfurt for a couple of years.
Yeah. My parents lived there for, I think my mom lived there for 15 years. Met my father there, so they were there separately. My dad did his PhD in Frankfurt, and my mom went to nursing school and was a nurse.
So they speak German still, or
they do. I mean, I think it's like anything. I think learning languages is not as easy as riding a bike. Like you can't just get back on and be like, oh yeah, this is, I'm picking that right back up. But if you're in the environment and you're surrounded by it, like when they go to Germany, my mom still has family there, so she was the first. They both were the first to leave and immigrate from India. Of each side.
I'm guessing, can your parents still cook like really good German food?
They do. Yeah, they definitely. There's like, I have memories of growing up and like, schnitzel and things were just sort of like a normal part of our life, which, I don't think I quite appreciated then as much as I do now. That it was like this really interesting combination of culture, Indian origin, but also this really big time period in Germany that shaped. And during a really,
15 years is a long time, right?
Yeah. And she was like 17 when she moved there. So it was, really formative years. And my dad, I think, was like maybe 20 or 21 when he moved there. And so, I feel like there's sort of this interesting combination of.
That is an interesting dynamic, Indian, German, like, yeah.
Yeah. It's not a very common one. I mean, there was in that time period a small group of them. So it wasn't just my parents. They had like, it's certainly more now than it was back in the 60s. But, as I think is pretty common in most immigrant communities, when you move to a new area outside of your country of origin, you tend to find others that are there, right? And you make a community where you are.
Yeah.
And so in the 70s, a number of them moved to the United States. And so we still have family friends here that my parents knew back in the days of living in Germany. They live in other parts of the US, but it was a journey that they all kind of did together. And a lot of that had to do through my mom's, being a nurse. That's how they kind of came to the United States.
So what's the next country we go to? Like, what's the country on your bucket list you want to travel to?
I would love to go to New Zealand. Okay. I have a good friend that lives there. I would love to, I haven't been to Greece. I've been to a fair amount of countries within Europe. Eastern Europe is definitely, and although I've been to India, South Asia, I haven't. I just recently was talking to somebody. I would love to do sort of like Thailand, Vietnam, that sort of.
I was just in Vietnam for 10 days from friends this September, man. It's just a great experience.
Yeah.
And we were stationed in Korea in the Army for 3 years. My wife has family in Thailand, right? He was in the Air Force, got off stage. We went there a couple of weeks here. So that's a fun time, yeah. So what's a country that you want to go to? And people like you want to go where? Like that's kind of like off the wall. Like me, mine would be probably like Norway. I want to go to Norway for some reason, right? I have
Yeah.
no idea why. Maybe the Northern Lights or cold. I don't know. But yeah, what's a country for you? Like people like you want to go where?
Uh, Gosh, what's a country that I don't know if I have one that's totally off the wall that I want to visit. Um, I mean, I'd love to explore the sort of some of the areas in Africa, but I don't think that's anything off the wall. I mean, right now, traveling is not. I mean, my whole family is going to India for um, Christmas, but I have 3-year-old twins, and I'm
Okay.
not quite ready
Okay. The long plane ride.
to
Yeah.
take a big plane ride.
Basically twins. Yeah.
Yeah, especially twins, and I'm like, that's not going to be fun for us or for anybody else on the plane at this
No.
time. So we're
Unless you like somehow buy all the first class tickets for yourself, right?
right. Yeah, no, that would be ideal, but not going to happen. So yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully in another couple of years we'll
Yeah.
start to be able to take sort of shorter journeys, international trips, but maybe we'll start with like Canada, Mexico,
Okay. Yeah.
things, and then
Some close by. Yeah.
work our way further. The older they get, yeah.
And you have twin boys, twin
I have
girls,
twin girls.
twin girls. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And so you're also an avid reader, right? Do you read
Try
like
to be.
do you like read like a book at one setting? Like do you like
Yeah,
and what kind of books you read?
I do tend to, if I pick up a book, I do tend to kind of like dive into it. I feel like I'm definitely a binge reader. I'm not like a let me read a chapter a day. I don't think I have that. I mean, I don't know if it's a lack of discipline or I just enjoy it and then I kind of fall into it. And so I think my reading kind of interests vary. I would say I went through a long period in my youth where I was really into like old British literature. I went through like the Bronte sisters, Jane Austen. I think I read Pride and Prejudice like 10 times. But more recently, I've been more into Audible. So I've been doing a little bit more reading while driving, sort of listening to the Audibles. But Trevor Noah's book, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, have been a couple that I've really enjoyed, especially the Audible audiobooks. I recently read Remarkably Bright Creatures, and I also enjoy reading some books by Indian authors. Jhumpa Lahiri is one of my favorites, Namesake. So those are a few. I mean, obviously, in the last few years with like small children, it's been a little more challenging. If I pick up a book, with you combine having young kids plus the sleep deprivation, it usually ends up with me just falling asleep. But trying to sort of get back on the bandwagon now that that's not as much of an issue.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, right? So there's a lot of things I recently hopefully I asked this correctly. So there's like people out there will say, if you're a woman, you can have it all, right? You can be the greatest mother, the greatest employee, the greatest wife, all that stuff. Realistically, is that possible? I mean, is it?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're all just doing our best.
Yeah.
And what having it all means is different to everybody. For me, it was important to have a career. I love what I do. I enjoy my work. I enjoy my colleagues. I like being involved in the community. But yeah, being a mom was also always a dream. So, I mean, I feel like I'm also incredibly fortunate and, have privilege that I could kind of do both of those things and that I had such a supportive community and workplace and husband. So he's actually been a stay-at-home dad for the last couple of years. So that's huge in allowing me to be able to do what I'm doing.
So is there like a big Indian American community here in the Seattle area?
There is, yeah. I think there's a pretty good concentration on the east side, at Redmond and Kirkland. But when I moved here in 2006, I didn't see that as much, I think. I felt like a little bit of a lack of that. I was involved in law school we have a South Asian Law Student Association. SALSA was our name. And we partnered with the South Asian Bar Association for events and mentors. So through that, I started to make connections with the community. I mean, I'm not from Washington, so I didn't come with like a built-in knowledge of, and I didn't know anybody here when I moved here. I had a friend from college who's not Indian, but so when I moved up here, I kind of had to figure that all out. And a lot of those connections in that community was made through law school, becoming a lawyer, and then being a part of the minority bar associations. So, and then also just within the immigration bar, we have a pretty good community of Indian immigration lawyers, and we all know each other, or most of us do.
And what age were you when you were like, okay, I want to be a lawyer? When did that happen? Like, most kids that grew up, they want to be like a superhero, fireman,
Yeah, you don't hear a lot.
or
Yeah,
astronaut, you know.
right.
But
And no, I wasn't like 5-year-olds being like, I want to be a lawyer. But um, I don't think I knew that I wanted to do it until after until I was in my 20s for sure. I kind of had this concept of wanting to do work that helped others, that improved others' lives. When I went to law school, I was more, I knew that I wanted to do something that kind of, helped others. And I had this idea of working in like the public sector, maybe doing nonprofit work. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do more policy side. I mean, you can go to law school and not be practicing law in the more traditional sense. You can use that to do a lot of other important work. So, and I think a lot of people go to law school not knowing exactly what area you're going to fall into. When we interview law students, we say, it's good to have sort of broad interests and to figure it out by going into the workplace and doing the work and seeing what triggers your interest the most. But obviously coming from an immigrant family, there's that kind of that background of knowing that that's the path my family took to get here. And then again, it's like the connections you make, the people that influence you. And one of my mentors was a immigration attorney. When I was living in Costa Rica, we stayed in contact. He was running for a judicial position at the time. And he said, hey, I could use some help. He was a solo practitioner. And so he was an immigration lawyer. And I was like, well, yeah, that's like an area that I was interested in. I don't know in what capacity, but it started my kind of journey when I came back from Costa Rica, giving me that insight into sort of this world of immigration, but like business immigration, family immigration. Because I think when a lot of people hear you're an immigration lawyer, they automatically think about like individuals in deportation, all the images you see, the border issues, sort of the images you see on TV, most commonly, which are true as well, but there are sort of many facets to immigration law.
so, what other types of law were you thinking about doing besides immigration? I'm sure does that be like were you thinking about doing corporate or finance or
I was not
criminal?
thinking about doing corporate or finance or criminal.
Okay,
Yeah, I was definitely like, I'm going to work at a nonprofit. I'm going to do
so
something
some
in
of them.
human rights. I mean, obviously going to doing the work in Costa Rica.
That was your mindset the whole time.
Yeah, and I did an immigration clinic in law school as well, where we worked on a case for an individual who was detained at the Tacoma Detention Center. And so I was like, well, maybe if I do work, I'll work on, helping individuals who are in detention. I don't even think I understood, that there were other parts to immigration law. And they're all obviously equally important, but it's just where my path led me, which is primarily in sort of business and family immigration. And so that first opportunity when I returned from Costa Rica helped open this new door. I was like, wow, I didn't even realize this existed. And it's very interesting. And then after a few years there, I worked sort of in-house with the tech company doing that work, and then ended up where I'm now at Ryan Swanson.
Yeah. So we have this presidential election coming up, right? And whoever you vote for, Trump or Biden, it doesn't matter to me. But does it really matter who wins the election as far as immigration law and stuff like that? Does it really make the big of a difference, or is all this stuff really done like at lower levels below the president, or does the presidency really
Oh,
matter?
yeah, certainly not. There's a huge difference in what the outcome of the election is. And, I've already practiced immigration law during both administrations now, right? So I was obviously doing this when we had a Trump presidency, and now during the Biden presidency, and during the Obama presidency in the past. So you can see the differences in your cases, obviously in the policy set by the executive branch. Obama gave us DACA, gave us the deferred action for childhood arrivals. And when we went through the 4 years of the Trump presidency, it's all about sort of a shift in their priorities and their perspectives. Like, is the concept of immigration welcoming, about sort of being protective and understanding that these individuals are coming into the U.S. in different ways. We have our high skilled workers, we have refugees, we have individuals who are coming to the border seeking help and asylum. And what is our administration and our country's sort of concept of that? And is it like, yes, we want to help these individuals. We want there to be a level of support, or is it more protectionist? And is it more, America first, right? So those concepts and that sort of outlook definitely weighs in on how our immigration system and policies and executive orders, all of these things, what comes down during that administration.
So is there a difference between policy for like, we'll say legal immigration and a different for illegal immigration, or is the immigration policy just immigration policy?
So immigration is federal. We have immigration laws, right, in place. We also have policies by the agencies. And what we see when we have different administrations, I mean, the laws typically don't change very easily, right? These are set laws. Takes congressional acts to do that. But what we do see change are executive policies and the direction and the sort of the kind of what the outlook of the agency. So are we saying, when we had a Trump administration at one point, they took away even from the sort of agency motto or guiding principles, the idea of like customer service, essentially. When I was doing, during practicing law during the last administration, every Friday, if you were an immigration lawyer, you would be sort of holding your breath, waiting for the next email to come from CIS saying, here's the new policy we're putting into place, or here's how we're now going to interpret this a bit differently than we did. Or here's a new travel ban. If you remember this was, a big deal during this time, the Muslim travel ban. So it was a different outlook on how immigration was viewed. And then even just preparing and filing cases, the rates of RFEs, which are sort of pushed back by the government. And, traditionally you think about it applying to really people who are undocumented, or so the focus being on sort of this concept of illegals, but it impacted everybody. I mean, my business immigration clients, it was always an uphill battle to get these skilled individuals who are in high tech fields or in, architects, accountants, engineers, all sorts, scientists. Even these cases with individuals who are filing for specialty occupation positions, it was still like you were climbing up a hill to get there. More pushback, more scrutiny on their cases, more denials across the board. So it was just a kind of a difficult time, I'd say.
Yeah. So what's your take on this, right? So I'm from Texas, right? It's like recently there's like this battle on the border, right? Like the state of Texas says we're going to protect our border, keep illegals from coming over. Then the federal government says no, that's our job, and Texas will say no, do your job, right? And I have friends on Facebook. They'll show stuff. There's no illegals here. Another friend will show like all of them coming across the border, like so, like how you know what's truth, right? What's really going on down there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that in this day and age that the concept of truth, like that's questioned so heavily.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It feels like nobody believes that. I mean, there's like 10 truths, and your truth isn't right, my truth is right.
Based on your lens and your personal whatever it is, and
yeah,
and you do your research on Facebook.
right, or what news network you watch, or what podcast you listen to, right? And yeah, there is certainly this ongoing battle between certain states and the federal government, and states saying, well, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. We're the ones that are impacted. And the federal government and the Department of Justice saying, nope, that's not in your purview. And you can't be, enacting laws or charging people with crimes that, fall into our purview of federal law. And so I don't think that's a battle that's going to be going away anytime soon.
No.
I don't have any great answers there. I think that there's so many great immigration lawyers that have sort of risen to the challenge, have traveled to the border, who have done such great advocacy work. I'm part of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and we're the interesting thing about the other reason I really actually enjoy doing this type of law is sort of the collegiality around it. We are not opposing counsel to each other, right? We are all doing sort of work for our clients, and it's filings and court, whether you're in court or whether you're filing with CIS, it's, the government's on the other side.
So is the government like kind of like the prosecutor? They're trying to prove, hey, this person needs to be deported, and they try to prove where they have to be reported to the judge. It's like kind of like almost like a criminal case. Like
there are courts that are specific immigration courts. It's different immigration cases, and I don't do immigration court work, but I've done some pro bono work, but yes, it is a separate system. And filings that we do, whether it be family or business, are all with USCIS. That's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. If you are working on cases that go through the consulates, whether it be family-based cases or investor cases, that's through Department of State, right? So this is all Department of Homeland Security, but there's all these different agencies that adjudicate, depending on what your case is and what the path is that you're doing.
Yeah. So this is my take on it, right? Like, I think you have like one side, they'll say like everyone come across the board illegal, they're rapists, murderers, drug lords. Other side will say like, no, everyone coming over is like the perfect person. They just want a better opportunity. But I think the truth's somewhere in the middle, right? But how do we as a country like kind of like determine like who's like, of course you can't be God to tell, you know who's telling the truth, right?
Yeah.
Because a mother with 3 kids might be, a drug lord's wife or something, right? You never know, right? So how do like we judge like who to come over, who like, I mean, I don't know how you do that, right? I just don't know how you do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, we have a system. It's not a perfect system by any means. There's plenty that needs to be changed, but we do have systems in place to help those individuals that come here seeking refuge or come here and apply for asylum.
And how do these people prove this, right? Is this like, do I say, I'm Jason, I came from Venezuela, I'm being prosecuted, they tell me I word of mouth after like some kind of paperwork or like?
It's sometimes both. I mean, if you are Jason from Venezuela that was persecuted for your religious beliefs and you fled your home in the middle of the night, did you have time to draft up declarations from friends saying, I saw you get beaten in the street
But
because
who's gonna know how
you're,
to do that? Who's gonna know to do that?
yeah. So I'm saying everybody has a different level of what they can present. In some cases, you're able to get evidence to demonstrate, yep, I was persecuted in my home country. Here's some records. Here's some statements from friends and family who are still there. Here's evidence that I was a part of that political group or that I did practice that religion. Here's photos
Okay.
of, it depends and varies by case. But
And so like me, I believe everyone tells the truth, right? It's probably a fault of mine. Obviously, everyone doesn't tell the truth, right? So when people cross the board and they're lying, but they're good liars, like I guess they kind of get through the system or like.
I mean, can I say that everybody that goes through the system is telling the truth? I can't.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us can say
And
that.
my thing is like, I don't think you shut off immigration because a few people lie, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to let them in, right?
I
I
mean,
think so.
you hope that the system is working in the way it should. It's designed to assess that, to route that out, to say, here's the standards you have to meet. Here's the people who are reviewing and adjudicating those cases, who are looking for those liars, who are looking for people who abuse the system. And then you have the advocates that are there to help people navigate it. It's not an easy system to navigate.
The system is definitely overtaxed right now, right?
Say that again.
The system is like definitely overtaxed, like overburdened with different things.
Yeah, I mean, there's more people that want to immigrate to the United States under all categories than there are spots available in any one given year.
And besides like hiring more people to handle this situation, is anything that's be done to fix this, you think?
I mean, that's a conversation that's been happening for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So our system, the general immigration system is based on a sort of a quota base. There's family and employment base are the sort of the most common routes. And we allocate a certain number of visas annually for those. So for like employment-based visas, we have 140,000 each year. And then for family-based, we have at least 226,000 each year.
And how often do those numbers change, either up or down? Or that pretty much solid for a long time?
That's the allotment, the minimum allotment. And then it goes through, there's a preference system. There's preference categories in each one. And then every country has about 7% of that.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, the demand from certain countries exceeds the amount allotted.
140,000 is not a lot of people.
It's not. And then you have this high demand from countries like India or China, these high skilled workers. And because of the high demand and the limited visas, then it creates these backlogs, these long queues where if you're an Indian citizen, let's say you're a software engineer here working at a tech company in Seattle, and you've probably got a 12+ year wait to get lawful permanent residence.
And what's the thing recently? I think I read somewhere like a lot of these tech companies are laying off these people, and now they have to go back to their home country within like a short amount of time unless they find another job or something.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on what category of work visa they're under. But yeah, I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot right now in the news on companies having these mass layoffs, depending on what your visa category is. That you usually have, let's say, for example, you're an H-1B employee, you have a 60-day grace period during which you can change status, adjust status, depart the United States. it's not a lot of time if you think about somebody that's probably been here for, I mean, some of these individuals could have been here for over a decade,
Yeah.
own a home, have
Mhm.
kids in school.
Part of the community, paying taxes,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Right. And
Kids in school,
so,
like you said.
right. And kids born here,
And
you
in 60
know?
days, you got to go back to your home country, whether it is,
Right.
where you
Yeah.
know no one.
Yeah. I mean, you might not have been there in such a long time that your community, your network has changed quite significantly. So it's a difficult position for a lot of people to be in.
So for these 140,000 slots, like on average, I'm guessing there's like 10 applicants for every slot available, or is it more than that?
Well, if you're imagining just taking, for example, India, these individuals have probably a 12-year wait. So if they go through the process, they get their number, it's called a priority date. And then they think, well, now I've got to wait 12 years because that's how long the line of individuals, it's, millions
Yeah.
of people who are waiting in line.
So I'm thinking out loud here. I'm not saying this the right thing to do, but like if I'm say I live in Vietnam, right? I'm trying to come here, just try your rate, and I look and I see all these people come across the border. Why don't I just fucking like catch a flight to like somewhere South America, come at the border and go like that way and cut the line, right? Like
I mean,
why not do that?
You could do that and come here, but then how do you stay? And I mean, I don't think for a minute that coming in, whatever the reason is that brings you into the country without going through the system, that it's easy to live here
Oh,
in
no,
that
yeah,
in
I
that
mean, that's
sort
true,
of
yeah.
in that sort of state of constant fear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's true. But if you're in a country like you're not doing good, like, man, I'm gonna live the American dream.
Well,
I can
yeah.
suffer for 12 years, or I can just take a risk and like, especially if like friends or family over here anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. That's why people do it, right? It's not generally they're just like, yeah, why not? I should just go live in this country.
Yeah, I don't see how you stop people from doing that. To be honest
Right.
with you.
I mean, you're not leaving in the middle of the night and bringing your kids across the border unless there's a reason behind that. This even living here, potentially in fear of being deported, not feeling scared of even sort of being able to call the police for protection.
Yeah, like you
don't
can't
do
get a
that
ticket,
lightly.
you can't do anything, right?
Yeah, you don't do that lightly. You're not just saying like, well, why not try this out? You're doing that for, in most cases, for a reason. And so I don't think that that's something that if you're, a tech worker, or if you have some other means to get here and actually be able to establish a life, even, and that's not to say that waiting in that queue, waiting 10, 12, 15 years, you're still living in this constant limbo of like, at any moment, this all could end. I would have to be uprooted. I have to figure out how to leave this country. And, we help clients when that happens, if there are no opportunities and they're getting down to the wire in that 60 days and they've been job hunting. And obviously right now the economy is not the greatest. It's a very saturated job market. So there are some things we can do to be like, okay, let's change you to a visitor status to give you maybe 6 more months to figure things out or tie up loose ends or, get your family. It's not like you can just pick up and uproot in a minute. And so,
how do you keep from getting too personally involved with your clients? Like I've had met that behind. I mean, it'd be hard for me to do not get personally involved. Like, how do you like keep that separate?
I don't think you do. I mean, I think most of us, and the work I do is most commonly with individuals going through, who are in employed, supported by employers or going through family-based process, but have a bit of security here. I can't even fathom what a lot of my colleagues do, where they are, solely working with individuals who are in detention or going through the asylum process. But regardless, even in the capacity we're in, we all have moments of laying awake at night thinking like, oh my gosh, if this doesn't work out, like this person has to leave. They have to uproot. They have kids. They have, their wife has a job. I mean, these are the things that you wake up in the middle of the night thinking like, did I do that? Is there another strategy I can do here? What other options? Did I pursue that, the right way? I mean, I think every profession has it to some degree, but when you're working in a profession where the work you do impacts somebody's livelihood and their family and their ability to live and work in the country, there are many nights that we stay awake thinking about that.
Have you ever seen, and don't give the name if this happened, but have you ever seen a lawyer like go too far? Like you're like, John, why do you move this family with you? Right? Like this is too much right here. Right? Has anyone gone that far to support people? Like you're like, okay,
to have somebody like move in. I mean, not. That
might be a bad example. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've seen attorneys like, definitely get really invested.
Like, you're putting your like self a professional risk by doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've personally had anybody put themselves at professional risk in what they're doing, but I do think you can get really invested and sometimes you're kind of keeping that line of like, this is a client, this is all I can do for them, can be difficult. And emotionally, you get really involved. But in the victories are even better when that happens. And you're like, yes, we tried really hard and this worked out. And, if it goes the other way, it can be very devastating for all of us. But
So for the back to it's H-1B1 visa is what it's called.
H-1B.
H-1B.
That's one of the types of work visas. It's for specialty occupation. It's probably the most common one that you'll hear in that.
So that one has 140,000
No, so that's talking particularly about employment-based green cards. The H-1B system for private employers, there's only 65,000.
Okay.
For individuals who have a bachelor's degree or the equivalent, and 20,000 reserved for individuals who have a U.S. master. So total of 85,000.
Okay. And so it's like just some random system. It's almost like a lottery system, like random picks. Like the cynic in me is like I don't believe that, right? Like there has to be some kind of hack, has to be some kind of, I won't say bribery, but some kind of grease in the wheel. Like how do you make people like me believe, no, it's actually a fair, equitable, like there's no like favoritism, no country has this, is all fair and above board. How do you convince people of that?
So the system's changed over the years. It up until 2020, it was essentially, if you're an immigration lawyer that practices in this area, all of March you are, sitting with your team, putting together H-1B packets, putting together petitions. We'd have like hundreds of these that we would ship out the last day of March to get to USCIS. They would have truckloads of these H-1B petitions arriving April 1st. And then they would conduct the lottery there. And then basically you would know if you were selected, if you either got a notice saying you were selected or you got a rejected entire packet back to your firm.
And these are they're actually like mailing, or is it emails, or combination of both?
Yeah, before 2020, it was you put the whole thing together. These are forms and evidence and filing fee checks, and you hope you did it right and you didn't get anything wrong, and you mail it all in, and then you just kind of sit and wait and cross your fingers. And then in 2020, the government put together a pre-registration system so that you didn't have to go through that exercise, and instead you would register the company or the employer and the beneficiary. And then it's a computer generated lottery that now occurs. And usually the results are released at the end of March. Again, 85,000 slots, but the demand is, I can imagine, is way higher.
It's like you said, it's a lottery, like winning, like almost like the real lottery, right?
It's a computer generated lottery. Yeah. And so like last year, there were about, I don't think it was like 780,000 submissions. And one of the things that they changed this year, because they felt like there was a lot of fraud, a lot of duplications being submitted, trying to game the system. So they've changed it to a beneficiary-centric system instead. So if you had multiple employers submitting lottery submissions, so if your employer, like I have 3 job offers and all 3 of these employers are willing to put a lottery submission in, you would still only count as one submission. You're one person, one submission.
That sounds
based
fair.
on your passport. And so that, you would think that would have been the case from the beginning, but that just changed this year. And so this year there were 442,000 unique beneficiary selections. And it feels like it was a good shift. It felt like the selection rates raised just a tad. It's still, the demand far exceeds the available 85,000, of course.
Yeah.
But it does seem like at least a bit of a shift in the right direction. So at least so that one person isn't taking up 5 slots, essentially.
Yeah, that sounds more than fair, yeah. So let's suppose, actually, I'll use myself as an example, right? So I have a developer, she's a Chinese immigrant, right? She applied for this last year, wasn't picked up, right? And she's gonna do it again next year as my employee. Is there anything I can do as an employer, like, what's somebody doing now? So I come to you and say, hey, take my case on, like, walk through the whole process for me if you can.
So we usually encourage employers, to figure out if they're going to move forward with this as early as you can. It's not a simple, we do an assessment. We usually call it a visa assessment at my firm, where we look at sort of the employer, the position, the beneficiary. There's a wage analysis. H-1Bs are position specific, location specific. And so we look at sort of all the components of it. What is their educational background? And we tell you, the employer, we say, okay, here's the challenges we could see with this. Like this position based in King County is, the requirement's going to be, here are the 4 wage levels for it. You're not paying them quite enough yet, but do you think by October 1 of next year, when the H-1B kicks in, that you can do that? Or we might say, hey, they're bachelor's degree is in a field that is completely unrelated to the role that they're going to do, this, immigrations, this isn't going to fly. They're going to say, how is this related? Because it's not just that you have a degree, it has to actually relate to the position itself. So if you're a software engineer, you want to have like a computer science degree. You don't want to be a software engineer with an art degree, right? That's going to be a tough sell and likely to get pushed back. So we go through that analysis ahead of time. We identify those challenges. We talk about ways that we can, if possible, get around it. Like, did they work for 15 years before that in the industry and then just like went and got a degree in a completely unrelated field? And if so, can we do an experience evaluation to say, but based on their 15 years of experience in tech, they have the equivalent to a bachelor's degree in a computer related occupation or computer related field. And in that case, we could maybe get an evaluation done to show that they do have a bachelor's in a field that's related. And so you want to do that ahead of time, because once you're selected in the lottery, you have 90 days. The window is short to get the case prepared, to get it filed. And then it's adjudicated between April 1 and June 30th. And then once approved, it starts October 1st. So that's the effective date of it for that, because that's the beginning of the fiscal year.
And all this is done online. Like, do y'all go like in person to represent?
No,
it's all online.
The registration's done online. Okay. The petition, although this is the first year they've started to allow for online submissions for that.
It's like you go to some kind of court and say, I'm here representing the cabinet HR, and he should pick his person because of this.
No, it's fine. I have some of my colleagues have been practicing for far longer than I have. One of my colleagues and mentors, two of them, but one of them has been practicing for like 50 plus years, and another one for maybe 40. And they both tell me and us all the time about how you used to be able to go with your H-1B petition to, there used to be a INS office downtown, and you could just stand in line and all the lawyers would be in line to file their packets. That doesn't exist anymore. We file it, usually it goes to like a lockbox or to a service center, and then we wait, and there's no personal interaction involved there. You're not calling anybody up. You're not going in person.
You just have to wait until they get the email.
It's a faceless process, right? Like your client is a name, and everything is in the paper.
That's probably the first way to do it, I would think,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a better way to do it, but I don't know.
With the volume, I mean, it's the more efficient way, certainly.
Is there any way you think we can fix the process, or like you think it's just the process what it is, or any?
I mean, I think that there aren't enough visas for the demand, and
85,000. That's like,
it's not enough. It is, and
it's 85,000 for the whole entire world, right? It's not like 85,000 for India, 85,000 for
that's total for each year. And so
these are actually people we want to come, like scientists and like highly skilled workers, right?
Yeah. So these are specialty occupations, which means that the position has to require a degreed professional. It has to be a position that requires somebody with a degree in that field to do it. So, you're talking about architects, accountants, lawyers, physicians. So yes, these are highly skilled professionals. And, now, so the lottery's done now. Here we are, and we're, just about in June, and we're in the filing period, the last 30 days. Everybody's kind of waiting to see, will there be a second lottery? 'Cause sometimes there has been in the last few years. We've had between 1 and 3 lotteries between, March and usually November was the latest one we've seen. And when that happens, then there could be another opportunity. If you were, it's from the original pool. You don't get to like reapply.
Okay.
But some individuals who are like, this is my last chance, are just waiting and hoping for that potential second lottery.
And so this 85,000 number, right? Does I'm making this up. Does Department of Labor tell immigrants, we need 85,000 more people doing this, or does where's that number come from?
It's set by it's set by Congress, and there have been times in the past, it predates my time practicing as a lawyer, where it was increased temporarily. So it is possible to be done. It hasn't been done. I don't
think the economics has to do something with it, right? Like, we need more people doing this, so increase the
we have not seen that. So I believe the last increase was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then
that seems insane.
And then in 2005, it went back to what we're at now, and so
that's regardless of the Republican, Democrat administration, like liberal, conservative.
Yeah, I mean, we've had both right since then.
That's kind of surprised, to be honest with you. I thought one would have a higher number, maybe another one a lower number. But
this number hasn't changed, although certainly advocates have been calling for a change to the system.
Yeah.
And it's not enough. And so now, you have all these really talented, intelligent individuals who are like, well, if I can't do it here, where can I go? Where can I make, where can I use my skills and make a life for myself and find a path to stability and making a home for myself? And we're going to lose, really skilled people to places like Canada, I mean, and I can't fault them for it if they feel like this isn't a place where I can build a life and a home.
So I hate to use the term low skill because they like low skill, talk about plumbers, all this trade, like they're high skilled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there a lottery system like what quote unquote the low skill people like there's 85,000 for high schools, like a lottery for like plumbers, traders, like carpenters, is like a lottery system for them?
So there is a quota system for so there's agricultural workers, and then there's also like hotel workers, things like that. There's H-2Bs. It's not an area that I practice in. And it's interesting because you do see those caps raised more regularly than we've ever seen for the H-1B. And those go through a similar system of having to apply. There's a set amount per year. There's a process for it. And that H-2As and H-2Bs, but it's not an area that I practice, and so my knowledge of it is much more limited.
Okay. So this is my thing too. Like, obviously we're a nation of immigrants, right? But since the beginning of time, like I think 1900s, there's all this, we don't hire at times, we don't hire Irish people. And they had the yellow laws in the 1920s. Like, it's like every generation have this anti-immigration thing. But we're like, oh, we're a nation of immigrants. Like, how do you like, isn't that oxymoron for us as a country? We're like so anti-immigrant, but so pro-immigrant at the same time, right? It's always like,
it's like a bit of a tug of war. And I think people are here for generations and generations and forget sort of, hey, somewhere in my lineage, my family went through this process to get here, right? But then you're here for a set long amount of time, and people have their own personal struggles. And I think that it's hard to see outside of yourself and realize that, yeah, we're a nation founded by immigrants. Like, we are a diverse pool, and there's a reason that exists, and that needs to continue to exist for us to succeed.
So do you think there's any way we can stop like having these anti-immigration laws? Like, let's say back in the 1900s, like we don't hire Italians or Irish, and yellow laws, like every generation says anti-immigration, or that's part of the American process, unfortunately, right?
I mean, I don't want to believe that it has to be. I don't. That's not the viewpoint I take. But obviously, there are people that have that sort of America first, people here first. Like, that's this sort of concept that we don't need the rest of the world, and that we are this silo that can exist alone. And I mean, but I can only speak for myself, but I just don't see how that's reality.
Yeah, me neither. So let's just change subjects real fast. So what do you do for fun? Like, fun hobbies? What do you do in your spare time? Like that kind of break loose, so to speak.
So I mean, obviously life has shifted a bit now with having small kids. You tend to sort of have to be more of a homebody for the first couple of years. But traveling was always something I loved to do. Cooking, my husband and I like to cook. And then, being outdoors as much as we can. We try to go camping in the summers, and we're starting to get back into that with the kids. And we have a couple camping trips planned coming up, and just kind of remember that there's life outside of the day-to-day grind.
When you go camping, do you camp for real, like out in tents, or you take the RV and like do the
No, we don't have an RV. We tent camp, but I'd say we're like sort of in between the hardcore. When we were younger and didn't have children, we would do more like hiking, camping. Now it's like we've got our car right there, but we still set up tent and bring food to cook.
Any favorite camping spots?
Last year we went to Raysar State Park for a camping trip. We're part of a group. It's sort of like for parents of multiples, and so it's like it exists for people who have singleton children. It's called PEPs, and then there's one for parents who have twins called PEMS, and they do like a camping trip. And so it's nice because it's like family friendly, and also we get to camp with a bunch of other twin parents and twin kids, and
I didn't think
commiserate.
So I never thought about so I guess there would be like some kind of twin community support group.
I mean, I didn't really have a lot of experience with it until I had my own, but there's a really nice support group. We had our kids, our girls, in the middle of the pandemic, right? So it was April 2021, and it was very, very isolated. Nobody was meeting in person. It was before the vaccine, so especially being pregnant and in a high risk pregnancy, you had to really kind of just not go out into the world because we didn't know what COVID did
Yeah.
to pregnant women. And then, I had, high risk pregnancy carrying two babies. And so we did these Zoom meetings with our twin group once the girls were born. And it was like, oh, connection, commiseration, just being like, this is so hard and it's so beautiful. And like, how do you balance having two kids at one time? And I'm a first time mom. So, I didn't have
Like walking to motherhood, right?
yeah, like here you go, going from childless to children, in one day. So it was I don't know that we would have really survived it like sort of mentally without having that support. And we still are friends with our group. There was like six families in our they try to pair you with people who had babies at the same time, of course. And
So have you noticed like you always hear like twins have like their own language and stuff? Have you noticed sort of like can I communicate different with each other or anything like that?
I don't think I ever noticed them having like their own. I mean, they do have their own language, but maybe not in the way that we think of it of like they're not like making up fake words, or at least yeah, I don't know, maybe that still comes, but I do think that they have like an understanding of each other that is sometimes doesn't even require words. And they very much have this connection that like I've never seen in siblings before. So it's like magical and weird
Yeah.
and but like I'm just in awe of it all the time.
Yeah. So obviously, you're doing like a lot of roles. With all the stuff you're doing, how do you make sure you take care of yourself, like physically, mentally, how do you make sure you take care of Marshall?
I don't think I was for the first couple of years. I was definitely just sort of like, you're in like this survival mode of, just getting through the day and definitely prioritizing everybody else's needs, ahead of your own kid, my kids, of course, first. Now I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm getting a full night's sleep every night. So which means like I can actually wake up and feel like I can do more than just survive, right? So I'm like getting back to like going and doing things to feel more healthy, working out, like reading books again. Actually going out of the house without the kids, having somebody come in. We have like a wonderful nanny that comes sometimes and helps us out. Not feeling guilty about being like, we're gonna go out to dinner tonight, or we're gonna go to this birthday party for our friends and leave the kids behind. I finally feel like we can do some of these things for ourselves again, which is nice.
Nice. So, like, on TV, a law is like glamorous and sexy, right? You're like Matlock, LA Law, all these different law firm stories on TV.
Yeah.
The law is like this stuff superhero and saves the day. But I'm guessing reality is the opposite, right? Can you like kind of tell like the like day like
I mean, there's some days I feel like, wow, I really lawyered today. Like I had, excuse me, a really challenging case that I felt really proud about. And then there's a lot of days where it's just like a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of checking boxes, making sure field, and that's important too. I mean, there's lawyering in that, but yeah, you're right. It's not the like catching somebody telling a lie on the stand kind of lawyering. But I think every little bit of it is important in its different ways, and we take it seriously and realize that yeah, it might be a box checked on a form or a field filled out or not filled out, but that can make or break something sometimes. A case could be rejected, which can have a domino effect if somebody's like, this has to be filed at this time, or I lose my status, or I lose my work authorization. There's really serious repercussions even to the smallest thing. So we try to remind ourselves, I think, that it's even the little things are important, just as the big victories are, where we feel like, whoa, I had a conversation, or I had to call Customs and Border Protection and help somebody get across the border today, and I get off that call and feel like, oh, I've got to kind of advocate like not in person, but on a call with the government and get somebody through. Or those things are maybe sometimes feel like the bigger victories, but I think they come in small versions too.
when you like do a call with someone, it can be anyone, right? And you introduce yourself to the lawyer, do you feel like you get more respect because you say I'm a lawyer versus I'm just Marshall? You think that's like kind of a bias people give lawyers?
I mean, I think sometimes it can go both ways. They'll be like, a lawyer,
I mean,
right?
that's,
I mean, it
yeah.
depends on their perception.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But I mean, I think one of the reasons I became a lawyer ultimately is I think so when I was in undergrad, I'm a banana slug. I went to UC Santa Cruz. That's their mascot. I'm very proud of that. And my last year, I did a program called UCDC where I think it was like maybe 20 or 25 students from all the UCs in the system. So like UC Davis and Irvine, UCLA, they all send about 20 or 25 students to Washington, D.C. We all lived in like a building that was built with like dorms or like apartments and then classrooms on the bottom. And then we were required to do an internship as well anywhere in the DC area. And so I did mine with the World Organization Against Torture. They changed their name to the World Organization for Human Rights, I think like right as I was leaving that fall. But in my capacity as an intern that fall, I was, providing like information to detained individuals. We had an attorney there that was helping individuals with like asylum cases. There was like one in-person moment where I remember there was like a woman who was I think she was from a country in Africa, and she was trying to explain something to that attorney about like a cultural sort of norm for her. And in a moment she like kind of looked at me because I think he wasn't quite getting it. She's like, well, you understand, right? Because like she could see that obviously I'm not, like a white male who was the attorney at the time. And I did, because like I come from a culture where, like I think in that instance there was something, it had something to do with like her relationship, and they were trying to prove it was a bona fide relationship, and it related to her visa case. And they were asking about like living together before marriage and things like that. And so what struck me in that moment was just a sort of a like, I, as a woman and a woman from a different cultural background, have a different perspective and can maybe also understand different stories of individuals that are going through this process differently than somebody that maybe is more far removed from it or doesn't have that in their background. And then if I am in a position of power or privilege, I can be an advocate for those individuals in a specific way. And so I think that is what, for me, becoming a lawyer in whatever capacity it ended up being at the time, I didn't know. That's what made me feel like it was an important goal, is to put myself in a position where I could do that, where I could advocate for people.
And so tell me again, what year in college was it when you decided to go to law school?
So I didn't decide in college. I think that was sort of like
After college?
like a light bulb moment of,
Okay.
that was my senior year at UCSC, and it was like a light bulb moment of like, okay, I think I'm starting to understand what I want to do. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it means becoming a lawyer. I don't know if it becomes being a public policy advocate or whatever. But it started that like sort of wheel churning, right, for me.
And how tough is it to get into law school? You always hear like law school is hard, medical school is hard. Is it really that hard? Like, I'm guessing
Yeah.
you have to have like a 4.0 grade point average, a
No,
perfect student. Or
I definitely didn't have a 4.0, but
okay, you had a 3.99.
I had something in the 3.5 or above, I believe. But I actually took 2 years before I
Okay.
went to law school. I kind of realized that I knew sort of what I wanted to do, but I didn't know if that was exactly it. And I wanted to work in that field in some capacity and see if it was something that called to me, or if I went and worked at law firms and was like, oh, this is the last thing I want to do. So I worked in San Francisco. So because I'm from the Bay Area originally, my family's there. And so when I graduated, I moved to Berkeley. I worked in San Francisco for 2 firms for 2 years, and and I was like a case assistant, sort of a paralegal legal assistant hybrid. So I worked closely with lawyers, and I kind of tried to see what it was like for them and whether I felt drawn to it. And some lawyers, I was like, what do you think about going to law school? Or like, oh, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't do it, And others were like, yeah, it's the best decision I ever made, and I love it. Then I, applied to different law schools. You have to take the LSATs, and then, based on the scores and your grade, then you sort of decide where you can go. I still had this idea of like, I want to go somewhere that had a really like a mission of service. And I applied to a few in the Bay Area, but I also looked up in Seattle and saw that Seattle University's law school had a really strong social justice mission, and came up and toured it. And I felt like, oh, wow, this school really, like, the students didn't seem like burnt out and free, like there was just like this vibe that I liked, and it felt very collegial. And I got a bit of a scholarship to go there. That didn't, hurt, obviously. So it felt like the right step for me based on where I was at that moment and sort of what my priorities were as far as like why I wanted to become a lawyer.
So let's do this. Like, suppose there's somebody out there They want to be a lawyer. They're supposed to have the grades to get in, like where that in life, right? Do two things. Do one thing where you convince them to be a lawyer, and follow up with like convince them why they should not be a lawyer.
Well, if whenever somebody has asked me, like, should I go to law school, I've always told them, don't go to law school unless you know you want to be a lawyer. Um, so I think there's definitely a pool of people who graduate or like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, and I don't want to be like a doctor or go into like engineering. So I'm just gonna go to law school and see what happens. But they don't really want to really do anything with the law, and probably could get like a master's in something and do exactly what they want to do without the mountain of debt that can often follow from law school. So I usually start with that. Like, what do you know what you want to do? And if so, like, is this what you need to do to get there? I mean, it's not just obviously the debt. It's 3 years. It's a very stressful time. I mean, it's challenging, it's consuming. You get that talk on, I think, the first week of law school, probably that you get in med school too, of like 50% of relationships fail once you start school in these professions because it's so all consuming. And so, that just kind of tells you sort of the level of stress and sort of challenge that you're about to experience. So all in all, if the outcome is not to become a lawyer or that you need a law degree to do what you want to do, then, obviously consider other options given all of that. But on the flip side, my experience with law school was great. I mean, I don't regret it when people ask me if the question I think I asked those lawyers when I was a case assistant, I say I don't have any regrets, and it's exactly what I would do again. I went to a law school that was incredibly supportive. I love the teachers. I love my friends and the friendships I made there. I was really involved, which helped a lot. I was like I said, I was in the South Asian Law Student Association. I did clinics. I was in the Women's Law Caucus. I was a article editor on the Seattle Journal of Social Justice. So, I felt like I really dove in and took as much out of that experience as I could. And I left it feeling, even though I graduated during a recession where there were no jobs, I still felt like I, had a lot of support from that community, and it was the right choice for me.
So I think if you go to like middle school, you have a lot of debt. And I could be wrong. I think if you're a doctor, you have like other debt. I think there's a program like if you go become a doctor, like a country doctor, like, like small town, the government like pays your debt off. There's a program like that for lawyers too, where they could be like small country lawyers somewhere.
There's some programs, government programs for people that go into public interest work. And I forget if you have to work 10 or 20 years for it to be forgiven, but it's still a long, it's still a long time, even if you are doing public interest work for that whole period. So
I was thinking maybe 5 years. You said 10 or 20.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but and I know that this administration has had some initiatives to help relieve that for certain students, but I have not been fortunate enough to get any of those.
My thing is, why would anyone like want to be a lawyer doctor? The 3 years of school, the high debt, it's like if you're a doctor, they don't. I'm pretty sure like a law school don't teach how to be a business person, right? There's no business school for lawyers. Like if you want to like open your own practice.
Oh no, there. I mean, no, yeah, there isn't. There are some, like I know Seattle U has a specific program to help people that want to become solo practitioners. Yeah. They have like a mentorship sort of help program for that. Excuse me. I don't know about with doctors.
Okay.
I think that people that leave law school or med school and go into that line of work where they are working at country doctor or working at, nonprofits, are, they're not doing it because they have no other choice. They're doing it because they love it, and that this is where they feel needed and where they can best use their skills and their expertise.
So for lack of a better term, is there some kind of like, lawyer customer service form, like a Yelp for lawyers, where people can go on this, that like,
well, you can go on Yelp.
Marsha gave me this great service, or, had a bad experience. There's something like there where people can look at when they're looking for lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, no, literally, yeah.
Yelp for real?
Go on Yelp, Google reviews. There's a site called Avo.
I've heard of Avo before.
Yeah, and that's specific to lawyers, where you can go. You can go in and you can actually ask questions, and sometimes lawyers can respond, and then there's ratings. So that's more legal specific. Okay. But no, literally, yeah, we get Yelp and Google reviews.
So I think a lot of times, like, I don't think most people don't have like a lawyer on a retainer, right? People can afford that. But most people need a lawyer, like, right now, like they maybe get a DUI or like they get in trouble with the law or whatever the case may be, right? They need a lawyer then. And like if you Google like a lawyer, like all these options come up. How does someone can realistically like pick the best lawyer from them, right?
Um, so I mean, a lot of the work that we get is through referrals. And I mean, like
Okay.
we always say that the best, highest compliment we can get is a referral, because that means that we did a good job well enough that somebody else is saying, hey, go to this lawyer. She's awesome. And other times it's referrals through, corporate clients or things like that. But yeah, it varies how it happens. How you choose an attorney can be through, I mean, I would say definitely getting somebody else's experience is a good way to understand if it's the right fit for you. But then just a consultation is a good idea. Sometimes it's not a good fit. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you feel like I just need an informational, like I'm on the right track. Obviously, as a lawyer, I'm usually like, it's good to have somebody guide you through the process. Immigration law is a bit different than maybe criminal or family, in the sense that I think maybe a large number of people do go through the process without a lawyer, especially the family-based side, right? Um, and sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, if you're kind of dabbling in it by doing your own thing, you may not be aware of new policies, procedures, fee increases, or what to do if you hit a roadblock. And so our goal, and sometimes this starts in the consult, is like to gather all the information and understand like what are your personal challenges, what are you coming to seek help with, can we help you, and how can we map this out? Like here's the what I always aim to do in a consult is explain like myself, what I do, and then learn about them. I usually go through their history and try to find any red flags, like, oh, you overstayed on this particular stay, that could be an issue for you, or did you have a criminal issue in the past, or things that could trigger problems if you file for any sort of immigration benefit. So that's like step one. And then once, if we do represent somebody, then it's getting them through the system. It's a, I mean, as we've discussed, it's a high volume complex system that can be challenging to understand and figure out. And you're not able to just, well, you can pick up a phone and call CIS, but whether that'll get you anywhere is another question.
So how do you keep the balance, like, having like a personal relationship with your client, so to speak? At the same time, you have this overwhelming number of people you have to deal with, right? How do you keep the client from being
I mean,
overwhelmed with a number?
I don't do it alone. I have, I work with an amazing group of professionals. We have um, awesome paralegals that really are like the heart of the case. They keep us organized. They keep, they usually do the drafting of the petitions. They monitor the cases as they go through their sort of life cycle, whatever the type of case might be. And like if it's a family-based case, we're doing check-ins with them. If it's a corporate client, because the other side is that we have these clients that we work with. Some might have one or two cases a year. Some might have a steady stream of foreign nationals. That might be a significant part of their workforce. And we are tracking and monitoring dates and statuses and expirations and trying to make sure that there's no sort of gaps or glitches in that prevent somebody from continuing to live and work and their life in the US. And then is the next step like employer sponsorship. So then we're kind of going through that navigation. And, as we talked about, there's changes all the time to the system. All of a sudden there's a new policy, there's a new executive order, there's a new fee increase, and making sure that they're aware of that. And if that does pose a unique challenge, how do we get ahead of it with them?
So I know on your bio on your website for your company you work for, it says you do pro bono work. I think most lawyers like do some kind of pro bono work. Is that just like a requirement to be as a lawyer? You got to do a percent for bono work. Is that as an
No.
individual decision by each lawyer to do pro bono work? Or how's that work?
No, it's not a requirement to be, as an attorney, you have no requirement to do pro bono work. Different firms have different sort of mottos and support levels of it. Different attorneys have their own priorities. Over my career, my pro bono work has shifted. I've done clinics. The King County Bar Association has neighborhood clinics, one of which is an immigration clinic. I did that for a number of years. We have citizenship days here through nonprofits that host at One America. And then one of the biggest nonprofits in our region is called the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. And they have a list of pro bono attorneys that they'll send like cases that come in to distribute, and then you can take on. And I try to have a couple of those at all times.
So you belong to a lot of organizations. I'm not gonna name all of them, but one's American Immigration Lawyer Association, uh, and some other ones, right? Can you just talk about the work you do with those? Like
Yeah.
highlight one or two you want to talk about, like the work they do.
Yeah. So the American Immigration Lawyers Association, I was mentioning that, it's our immigration bar association, basically. And it's unique because, as we talked about earlier, we're much more kind of collegial. We like share information and data and insights and trends and timelines within our kind of immigration bar, because we're all sort of doing the same work, not against each other, but filings with the government. And so every state has its own chapter of this national bar. For Washington State, I've been involved since 2013 as a member, but then also on the executive committee in varying positions. And then in 2019 to 2021, I was the chair for the state of Washington for our local chapter. And it's amazing group of immigration professionals doing all the types of immigration work, business and family and removal, defense, et cetera. And it's great because we also then have these connections with the government too through our organization. So our local USCIS office, CBP, ICE, we try to build these relationships through that bar association. And then it's really information dissemination. We're telling them the challenges we are seeing. They're giving us information to better help individuals going through the process. Sometimes that door is open, sometimes that door is more closed. Again, this goes back to our sort of the administration in charge at the time.
So what's your own personal career goal? Like, do you want to one day be an immigration judge, or you want to start your own law firm? Like, what's your you have like a long-term career goal?
I am I don't do that type of work anyway, so I wouldn't be a good immigration judge. I'm not in court. I'm not doing the court work. But what I'm doing now is what I love to do, and I'm sort of like living it. I have a great team at Ryan Swanson that I work with, and we're doing work with amazing clients across all industries. One of the things that I've always kind of loved about my sort of chosen practice area is that we get to work with all kinds of clients. Like sometimes I'm working with an architecture firm, sometimes I'm working with an accounting firm, sometimes I'm working on an extraordinary ability case for an ICE artist. Sometimes I'm, doing pro bono work, but I'm like learning about so many different fields and, engineers and doctors, naturopathic physicians and medical technologists. And it just kind of keeps me always interested in what I'm doing, because I'm focusing on the immigration part of it, of course, but I have to learn about what they do. I have to learn to some degree and be able to speak that language, because I'm translating that into the laws and the applications, the petitions that we file in a way that makes sense to the government to understand. Here's what this person does, and here's why it fits into whatever visa category we're talking about.
So can you talk real fast about some of the people who have been your mentors, either right now or in the past?
Yeah. So I feel like I've been so incredibly lucky to have the most supportive community behind me. And that started back in law school with having an amazing professor that kind of believed in me and brought me down there for that oral argument before the court, gave me the connections to go to Costa Rica and work with the UNHCR. And that's Professor Onkoviak. And then when I was figuring out my next steps and through my connections made with the South Asian Bar Association, I was introduced to Judge Ketu Shah. At the time, he was an immigration lawyer and a pro tem judge. And he, gave me my first chance, basically, and said, yeah, come in and work with me, and like taught me sort of the first things I ever learned about business immigration, and helped mentor me and kind of get me started in the field. He's still a judge now. That's what he does fully. But, that was like my launching point. And that's when I met the mentors that I have now, that brought me into Ryan Swanson, Joel Padgett, Janet Cheatham. These are my partners that I work with, my immigration lawyers as well, Amy Royalty, and they've all kind of helped me along the road of learning and knowing what it means to be a lawyer. But I always tell law students is like, you learn to be a lawyer once you actually start practicing. Like you go to law school, you learn how to think like a lawyer, you learn how to write like a lawyer, sort of in this abstract, intellectual way. And then once you are practicing, that's when you're kind of shaped and guided and taught how to actually do the lawyering. And those individuals are the ones who've done that for me and believed in me and supported me, and who I've modeled my lawyering styles after. A little bit of each of them is kind of what makes up who I've become today.
And next part, to me, the more important part of the question, who are you mentoring right now?
So, in our firm, we have, associates that come up and we assign mentors to them. I have two individuals, one who's one of the associate attorneys in my group, Jen Chen, and then I also work with another associate, Kyung Sun, and Park, who is, assigned as my mentees. I tried to kind of do what I can to share my experience and help support them, not just as lawyers, but just as like women in the field, individuals in the field, sort of about making that balance. Recently, a colleague of mine, Cody Nunn, and I went to UW and spoke before sort of a group of pre-law students who are, just finishing their bachelor's and thinking about law school and becoming a lawyer. And that was an interesting, like, me remembering and sort of reliving like what was I thinking at that point in time, and trying to share again, just as like a mentor, as somebody in the field, the challenges that I was going through at that time as well.
So when you decided to work for your current law firm, was it a combination of like you picking them, or was it more than recruiting you? A combination, like how did you decide to go to this law firm versus the other
It has to
opportunities?
go both ways. I mean, they didn't like reach out to me and say, "Hey, we heard about you." I was a young lawyer, and I had been practicing for like 2 or 3 years at the time. But I was introduced to Janet Cheatham through another immigration lawyer who, I had just had like a coffee with, to be like, how do I, I'm looking for next steps. And then just through, again, like I think it's always comes back to networking and meeting new people and opening up doors and connections in that way. One of my other mentors is a in-house counsel at Starbucks, and I met her through the diversity fellowship that Starbucks has. Her name's Jane Kaufman, and she was huge in my sort of early years of lawyering and trying to figure out like, where do I go, what do I do, how do I navigate the system. I didn't take the traditional path, right? Like a lot of people went to law school, they did a summer associate at a firm that turned into an offer at that firm, and then there you go, there's your career, right? I went to law school, graduated, there was no job opportunities, went to Costa Rica, did that for a few months, came back. And so, as I was sort of figuring this out, she was such an amazing mentor for me to be like, okay, here's how you speak to a law firm. Here's how you like, let me translate what they're saying to you in this hiring process. And so these are all sort of ways in which I've been trying to also help, when I speak to people going through the same process, I try to give them that bridge and that door as well, like open that door for them as well, if I can.
And so like you're happy with your job now, but is there a job out there you'd have to consider, like suppose somewhere said, hey, we're going to put you to be the state director of immigration policy for ICE or some kind of government thing, like something like this. Anything out there like kind of like would at least
Yeah.
pique your interest?
I don't know. I mean, there was a time when I thought, well, it'd be interesting to be involved in the creation of policy and to do sort of the research work around that, and kind of be involved in the decisions that set those policies instead of being somebody that is helping people navigate through them once they're set. But if something like that presented itself, then I'm not saying I wouldn't consider it. It was when I was chair of the Immigration Lawyers Association for Washington State, one of the things that we do each year, that all the chapters do around across the country, is called National Day of Action. And we go to Washington, D.C., and we have meetings set up with our members of Congress. And we basically just go and speak to them about sort of, we're immigration attorneys. Here's what we see in the system that needs to be addressed. Here's stories of our clients. Like, we want to bring people's like how this is really impacting lives to you. And so I did that in March 2020, which was like a really interesting time to be doing that because obviously started the pandemic. We got to DC and found out that pretty much entire delegation for the state of Washington was on a plane with Vice President Pence headed back to Washington. because as you probably remember, Washington was like the start of COVID, right? So they were all coming back to be like, what's going on? How, what's happening in Washington? And so we got there, but we still were able to meet with there was a couple people still, I remember we met with Senator Cantwell at the time and in 2020, and then it's chiefs of staff for other representatives were there. And so we were still able to sit down and just have these conversations. And it was great because it was not just Democrats. You would think that only the Congress members that are Democratic would be open to even having that discussion. But, luckily in Washington state, we have Republican members of Congress who also understand the importance of immigration and, see that in how that impacts lives of their constituents. And so those conversations and that experience, to me, I was like, wow, this work is amazing. Like I could see doing this at some point in my life. How that would work out or when that opportunity would present, I don't know, but it was a little bit of a glimpse of the impact you can make if you're on that side of the conversation. You're having those conversations with decision makers and members of Congress. So yeah, I think I'd be open to it if there was.
But basically, you found your life's work already, right? And
yeah,
and so many people live the whole life and don't find the life's work. So that's really good for you.
yeah, I think I found my life's work. I think it was like a windy road of I don't know how I got there, but it was a lot of different experiences in like related, but not exactly what I'm doing right now, roles and experiences. But I find a lot of joy in what I do and helping people and helping. I mean, what we do is not just individuals, but clients, corporate clients, and sort of helping them figure out and support their employees and understand how to navigate the system. I find it enriching.
So I'll probably make this up, but there's something out there that shows. I'm trying to make it. Something that shows that like, let's suppose in the year 2022 we had a million immigrants, right? Either illegal. The million immigrants came across the border, right, or came to the country, right? There's some data that shows like X percentage would become homeless, X percentage would become on welfare, X percentage would become like categorized it some kind of way. It's just like no.
Is there some data that could categorize it that way? I am not sure. I mean, I think that individuals that come in undocumented, certainly the resources are limited. And also it's like just finding those resources. I just attended the Northwest Immigrant Right Galas. They have an annual fundraising gala and was reminded of sort of the importance of organizations like that exist because they were founded out of this need of, all these individuals coming here and feeling like there is no support system to help them figure out what are the steps. How do I seek support? And I know we've talked about people that, you're like, well, what about the people that come in and lie or are just trying to game the system? And sure, there's always going to be some segment of that, but the majority of these people are here genuinely seeking support and refuge and protection. And, I think organizations like that, that are there to educate, inform, and provide those resources are just invaluable in our community.
So how true is this, right? And, this is not a news source, but I heard this on Joe Rogan podcast a couple weeks ago, right? And of course, a lot of people do get news from Joe Rogan, because he does a lot of good guests. But he's talking to someone in there, and they were saying that, like, when someone crosses a border, the Biden administration buys a plane ticket to New York City, and in New York City gives like $10,000 debit card, right? Is that accurate? Is it inaccurate? Like,
no. So I think what we've seen probably more in the news these days is how different governors from different states have been shipping immigrants. Have you been seeing that where they're like, well, they're all coming to our state and we're not getting enough federal support. So we're going to put them on a plane and we're going to send them to Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
Or we're going to send them to Seattle or to states that are more supportive of individuals coming and seeking help. And actually here in Seattle, we have a group of attorneys in partnership with NERP that is helping. There's a large group of refugees right now here just in Tukwila, and I think they're being housed at like a church. And again, this is sort of what I love about my immigration bar and community. Immediately upon hearing of sort of this crisis of these individuals that were sent over here by another state, they came together, they put together a clinic, they found housing for them, and they've put together through a partnership with the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project and a group of attorneys, Paul Soref, Esther Greenfield, and and other attorneys have gotten together, and they're helping them navigate and put together TPS applications, as temporary protected status applications, and reviewing asylum options for them. And like that, I think, is where we need to figure out how best to support individuals that come across, instead of saying, okay, well, either A, we're just going to detain you indefinitely, and like put you through some quick asylum process that's barely touching upon the experiences you've had, or, put you on a plane to another state because we want to deal with you. Just having that resources and then having the
So
manpower.
the states that do this, you think they're doing good thing, bad thing? Because it's not like,
I think they're trying to prove a point. I
yeah, I
think
mean,
they
that's true.
think
Yeah.
they're making some sort of
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Because like your state of Texas, Arizona, like you don't have the resources. It's supposed to be like a federal government thing to do, and they're not doing it.
Yeah. So we're just gonna like put them
Yeah.
on a plane, pay
Yeah.
for them
But
with taxpayer
some of these
money.
communities I do think are hypocritical. Like you brought Martha Vineyards. I can make this up, but I think Martha Vineyards are kind of liberal. They're like pro immigration. And then when Texas sent these people, immigrants there, is like within days they sent them to New York City or something, right? I could be totally making that, but like you're pro immigrant, like then
Then you deal with it. Yeah.
yeah, you got opportunity to help these people, and then they ship them off too. I think like
Yeah,
I could
which
totally be making that up.
it's not smart because you're just overstraining other states. I mean, it's not that they're not pro-immigrant, but we also don't have the resources for any one particular state to,
Yeah.
handle the influx. And so, I
So
mean,
should there be, man, I hate to use it. Should there be some kind of like, I don't know, federal institution camp or something like, of course, that goes down a slippery slope, you know?
yeah, well, as we know from history, right?
Yeah.
And there are these detention centers that exist,
Yeah.
and we all saw during the last administration, kids in cages and all
That
these sort of,
definitely not a good look.
yeah, all these sort of attempts to contain, excuse me, in not humane ways at all.
Yeah. Like I'll say, like people way smarter than me, way more money hadn't figured this out yet, right? So,
Right.
and
And way harder than me. Yeah, I can only kind of hypothesize, but
yeah, cause I think like I think what's called the I-9 law. I can't remember, it's called immigration something law. It was only passed in 1986 in the Reagan administration. So even back then we've been dealing with this, so to speak.
yeah, that applies. So you're talking about the Form I-9, which I mean,
Yeah.
as an HR
Yeah.
professional, I'm sure you
Yeah.
get a lot of questions about. But anybody employed in the U.S., if you're a W-2 employee, you go through that, whether you're a U.S. citizen or an individual who's only temporarily eligible to work. And that is specific to confirming your identity and your work authorization. And for such a simple form, you would think, well, this is like easy
Yeah.
peasy, and
No.
it is not. Yeah.
No, it's not, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah.
And it is one of the ways that the government is trying to enforce ensuring that employers are taking the right steps and not employing individuals without work authorization, right? And so there are audits that are conducted sometimes at random, sometimes on complaint, that go through and ensure that you are complying, that you are verifying that within 3 days of them
Yeah.
beginning work with you, you're completing the sections appropriately, you're obtaining the right documents, and that you're not asking inappropriate questions or asking for documentation that could violate,
Yeah.
anti-discrimination laws.
Yeah. That's how I tell people, like for HR, like the odds are the give them RD is probably slim to none. However, what happens is like some employees gonna file a complaint against you, and then they look at everything, right? Because they figure you did this one thing wrong, you did everything wrong.
Right. And the penalties can be high if they find that there's some sort of pattern or practice of knowingly hiring individuals or asking questions that are inappropriate, or even how you preserve the documentation. Like, do you keep the copy of the driver's license and the social security card? Do you do that for everybody, or do you do it only for the individuals that you think like, maybe they're not, and that of course can appear as if you are conducting a discriminatory practice. So part of what we do is help with that compliance issue with clients and making sure that even though it feels like the simplest thing, I can tell you that one of my colleagues always says, like, give me 10 I-9s and I'll do a free audit for you. If I find 0 errors, I won't charge you for my time.
That will never happen.
And it's almost every time we will find that there is errors in the I-9 completion. Yeah. There's errors in their policy. They're not, maybe they're asking some, but not everybody, for documentation. Maybe they're asking people, like, give me your green card. You cannot.
Maybe the document is like expired license from 2021.
Well, driver's license it's fine. You don't have to re-verify those. Those can be
But people
or maybe they're not re-verifying. Maybe somebody gave them a work permit 2 years ago that expired, and they never thought like, oh wait, I've got to re-verify that I-9. So part of what we do is help in that compliance issue, or if there is an audit, which currently, I think it was in the last couple months, the government said, like, well, our focus right now is going to be more targeted on like complaints. We're not doing as many random, but But when you are audited, like how do you handle that? How do you deal with your employees when you look at your I-9s and you go, oh no, we didn't do a very good job. Now we've got to tell our workforce, we've got to figure out how to fix it. We've got to let them know we're being audited. In a lot of cases.
And you're still running your business, hopefully. So now you got to take time out of running your business to do this government stuff
And in most cases, it's just a government contractor showing up at your front desk and saying, hey, I'm from the government. I need to see your I-9s. And sometimes they'll have a notice, and they give you like 3 days to respond. They're like, you've got 3 days to turn over all your I-9 paperwork. And usually that's when we get a call and we say, okay, well, we're going to contact them. We're going to get you an extension. We're going to do a review. We're going to figure out what you can fix. We're going to tell you how to let your employees know so that you can get folks in to fix anything, because you can't fix Section 1. And a lot of times, sometimes when they let their workforce know, people don't show up again for work, right? Because
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And that's okay. That's one way of saying, okay, well, yes, these people were apparently not work authorized, not employed with us anymore. But how do you sort of navigate that and not, and make sure you get out of it without like huge penalties or worse, right?
Yeah. So me and you met at this Seattle Chamber of Commerce networking event, I think dating event about maybe a month or two ago.
Yeah.
So like, why in your position, you're a successful lawyer, why still network? Why do you still feel important to network?
I mean, like we've been saying, I think throughout, to me, networking, being in the community, making those connections with folks it's been what I've done from day one that I feel like has helped me to kind of be successful and kind of move up in my career, but also just stay connected in the community, meet new people, learn about businesses and business needs. I don't think there's really ever a time that you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, certainly there's times when I'm doing it more and times when I'm doing it less. Like I said, I'm kind of coming out of this like couple years of intense parenting with young kids, and I'm sort of returning to that part of like being involved, being in the community, networking, meeting new people. And I'm always excited to like learn about new businesses and figure out like where they might need support or help or how we can be of service. And, it might just be like, hey, we've just hired our first ever, like this has never come up in an interview, but this person just told me I need sponsorship. We don't know what that means. And sometimes it's a company that's maybe got a pretty good workforce of foreign nationals and realizing like they need more support than they have at the moment. But whatever it is, it's always kind of exciting and a new challenge for us to start that relationship with employers or obviously for individuals as well.
So let's suppose like there's a case you do and it's successful, right? What the success is, that case is successful. Are you able to like, kind of highlight it on social media? Like, hey, we got this done for Cabinet HR. I kind of highlight on social media. I was like, it's a law to like highlight stuff.
Well,
like
I mean, as an attorney, obviously we have confidentiality with our clients. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I mean, you can get permission from clients, and sometimes it's a case that you're like, wow, I would love to be able to sing from the mountains that it's been years of going through this. And, and a lot of attorneys will post pictures with like their clients who just were naturalized in front of the American flag. You're like, hey, I'm a U.S. citizen and I've helped them since they were undocumented. But, you can do that. But of course, you need to have permission first, consent from your clients, because you don't want to breach attorney-client confidentiality.
Yeah. So is there like, I know medical is called HIPAA. Is there like a term for that for lawyer-client confidentiality? Is like an actual term?
It is that. It's attorney-client.
That's all it's okay.
Privilege, right? So as an attorney, you are bound ethically to keeping your client.
So is that based on some kind of oath from like the 1400s or something? Like what are that?
I don't know when the oath came in, but yes, when after I passed the bar, when I went to get my license, I had to go and take an oath with my hand raised and say, yeah, I will uphold all the tenets
and
law.
Breaking that, no, hey, like
no, generally no. Okay. Yeah, generally no. Unless, if there's like a criminal element or something or like harm. But no, yeah, there are specific RPCs that are rules of professional conduct, ethical rules around that relationship between, just like it is between a doctor and your patient. Yeah. Attorneys have that with our clients as well.
So how do you keep up to date with all the different law stuff that changed, like the professional development pieces? Like how you do that? You have to do that on your own? Does the law firm you work for provide that for you?
I mean, we do that as, our firm is multi-practice. So, we're one segment of it. We're the immigration team. We have employment lawyers, we have real estate lawyers, we have business lawyers, we have litigation team, healthcare. And so, our immigration group, AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, is a huge resource for most lawyers in kind of they do that work for us, right? They have a team that does advocacy and monitors the legislative sessions. They have a team that breaks down. It's our AILA 8. Every day we get an 8-point email bulletin that says, here are the things that happened today. And then most of us, have subscriptions to like USCIS email alerts and policies too. So we're keeping our eye on what's happening and making sure that we know. And I've been in roles of leadership with AILA for the last decade. My team, the group that I work with, we all several other attorneys are involved in it, and so they might be liaisons to CBP or CIS or Department of State, and we information share. We make sure that we're all aware of what's happening out there.
And so once you pass the bar exam, it's not like you got to take it every 5 years, every 7 years. Once you take the bar exam, you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
And unless you get disbarred, which I'm guessing has to be very hard to get disbarred, you're much a lawyer for life, correct?
Yeah, you have to do some continuing legal education. So the WSPA has requirements. The Washington State Bar Association has requirements that you're always learning. You're always taking a certain number of credits of continuing legal education. Most of us go to like conferences and things in our field that tend to meet those requirements. But there's certain number of credits. There's a certain number of ethics credits you have to do. I think the period is like 2 or 3 years. Every few years you report and show I took these courses and these classes and met the credits. I think the WSBA also included, there's a new one for like, say it's like diversity, equity, inclusion credit as well that was implemented recently.
So I can't remember the term is, but what is it called? Like you get your law degree in the state of Washington, then you can also practice in Colorado, Nebraska.
Reciprocity.
Yeah, that's it, right. How's that work?
As an immigration lawyer, it's federal law. So actually,
you can practice all 50 states.
We
have
and
territories too, correct?
We have clients in not just in the state of Washington that we represent because we're representing it before the federal government, right? So that is another, I guess, benefit. I mean, obviously, it's easier to practice in the state. You work in terms of making those connections with like local officials, like local government agencies, like our local CIS, our ICE, all these things. But we can represent clients nationwide essentially, and we do, and that's another awesome part of what I do is that I get to have that breadth of client base.
Yes. And so do you do anything on social media for yourself or your career or?
I mean, we have a really good business development team at my firm. And so they, we have LinkedIn. I think you mentioned like informational, we try to do sort of informational, not always webinars, but sometimes webinars that like my colleague Cody and I did one on the HRB lottery, explaining the system, and this year the new beneficiary centric sort of adjustments made to the system. And so we try to put that out on like YouTube and things like that. Our firm does have like a Twitter account and things like that. So, we try to kind of keep, and we do kind of alerts to our client base. So we'll have like a marketing list. And so if there's something big that's happening or coming down the pipeline, we try to post on all of those platforms like LinkedIn, email alerts, tweet, whatever it might be.
So you said you're happy right now, right? But I have to guess in the future, you're going to want to compete to be I think it's called a partner, right?
I'm a partner.
You're a partner right now? Okay. So it makes it easier than like, how does one become a partner? So is it based on like, you have to like bring a certain amount of business for the law firm? Do you have to bring a certain amount of cases? Or is it like,
I mean, different firms have different policies around that, sort of not only what it means, how to get there, but also what it means to be a partner. There's and also how you come in. Are you like a lateral hire? Are you coming in as an associate? Oftentimes you're like an associate for 7 years, and then there's a vote on partnership.
And is being a partner kind of the same as like being a tenured professor?
It means you're a business owner. You're a partial business owner. You're all partial business owners of that business. Some firms have like multi-tier structures, like you can be equity or non-equity. So you'll get the title of partner, but you're not like a business owner. Our firm is equity partnership. And so, I have about 20 partners and we're all, partial business owners. And, great group of lawyers who we all support each other fully. And because we're a multi-practice firm, we're not all doing the same area of law. It's really wonderfully collaborative because like yesterday I called my partner Paul Meyer and I was like, hey, I've got a business question for you on how nonprofits are set up because this individual who's an immigration client is asking about it. I often do that with a lot of my partners in other areas. I'll call up Brittany Pierce, who's one of my employment lawyer partners, and say, this is a immigration question, but there's an employment law aspect to it because it might involve hiring or termination or some other policy. And, I'm not going to try to dabble in other areas. That's always dangerous. So I just walk across the hall or pick up my phone, and I've got this amazing group of professionals who are resources for me and my clients as well.
You all ever like partner meetings? Y'all be like, hey, Jason, like, dude, you're slacking. Like, you need to step your game up, right?
Not in that exact way, but maybe something like that. I mean, I think, yes, we do. We have monthly partnership meetings where we all get together after work and, we have like usually dinner catered in and we sit and we talk about the state of business and, what are we seeing? What could use some improvement? How are people doing in our firm? Like, what can we do to better support the staff? We look at finances. We talk about, all the usual sort of things that I think any business goes through, but there's the 20-ish of us that do that each month. And then we have a management committee, an executive committee.
Right. Is there a standard out there that says like, for every lawyer should only handle like maybe 100 cases, 200 cases, like some kind of standard, like you like have over this number of clients, it's too much? Like any kind of standard?
I don't know that there's a number out there. I mean, professionally, you should be handling the volume of cases that you can still do more than adequate, a great job advocating for your clients for. Immigration tends to be a higher volume of cases at once. A lot of times it's because the cases take so long to process. And also it's not like a single point in time. Like you may have an employer call you and be like, hey, I got to hire this person. They're on an H-1B. I need to sponsor them. Can you, help me do this filing so we could onboard them? And we kind of go through that process. So then they get, we file, it gets approved. They start with this employer, but that's not the end of their journey. H-1Bs are valid for 6 years and usually allotted in 3-year approval chunks. So we're monitoring that. We're making sure that 6 months before that expiration date, we're reaching out. We're talking to that employer. We're saying, okay, what's the long-term goal here? Because if you want to go beyond that 6 years, then you're going to have to think about permanent residency. Do you want to sponsor them? Do they have another path to that? So it's immediate support and long-term vision. And that's one person in their employment. Like maybe they've got a team of 100, who knows, of foreign nationals, depending on the employer. So it can vary. So based on that, your volume can be, I might have like 50 active cases that are in varying stages at any one time, but then in our like database, that we sort of software system we use, we might be monitoring and tracking and getting reminders on much more individuals than that, but not immediately, that need attention.
So when an employer comes here, they say, I want to sponsor, whoever, right? How many do you actually think know like what the commitment is, right? Or you have to like educate them, like,
yeah, that varies. It depends on if they like some companies have very sophisticated global mobility teams, right? Like that's a very key part of their workforce. They've developed a robust sort of immigration policy and system and framework, and they have global mobility team that manages that. Sometimes it's an employer who's like, I've never heard of this. What does this mean? What is an EAD? Like I can I even do this? And then there's anything in between, and so it's interesting to work with both sides. Sometimes it's nice to be like, okay, what this term means. Like, what an LCA is, what an H-1B is, what USCIS is, like the agency that adjudicates this. But it's also really nice to help somebody from the first day that they've ever learned about it. So an employer that's like, we don't have a policy. Like, what does this mean? How do we do this? And it can greatly vary. But I think our role as immigration lawyers is to either maybe help them create that foundation, understand what their company needs, talk through it with them, and set up those policies. Like, do you want to say you got to work with us for a year before we even talk about green card sponsorship? But is that competitive in this market? Like, will somebody stay with you if they have to wait? And also going back to sort of, these are individuals that are here temporarily in the United States and they are lacking that stability, right? They're like always thinking about do I have to leave in any particular time? How can I get my permanent residence? So you kind of have to think as an employer from a lot of that perspective as well. Like if this is somebody you're investing in, which really sponsoring somebody is an investment
Yeah,
for
it's
the
a big time
company.
investment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you've probably advised on this when you've talked to employers about whether they should sponsor somebody. Like this is not. I think people there's a little bit of a concept like, oh, immigration's so easy. They just hire these foreign nationals. They take our jobs.
No, nothing like that at all.
But yeah, I mean, in the sector that I work within with employers and these, it is a big investment. And April 1st, the government just increased everything, exponentially. The filing fees are higher than they've ever been. So it's not something they go into lightly. It's something they do because this is a talent. These are talented,
They help the company
educated.
get better and
Yeah,
increase profits, all that kind of
and
stuff.
they're not finding that skill set in other areas.
So does the company have to prove they can't find the skill set? Like, how do they prove they
no,
can't find the skill
not
set?
for an H-1B. For H-1Bs, there isn't that. But for employer-sponsored green cards, it's a higher burden.
Okay.
So there's a process called the PERM process, and it goes through the Department of Labor, USCIS, and then if they're here in the United States, that's how it's adjudicated. But in that Department of Labor process, there is a piece of it that requires you to recruit. You have to engage in an active recruitment for the role to see if there are available, able, willing, and qualified U.S. workers.
Okay.
So, and this is for the green card process. This isn't for the H-1B process, but even for the H-1B process, you have to post a notice. You have to post an attestation that says, hey, we're hiring. This is the role. This is the wage range. Here's the occupational category.
And how long is that to stay up? Like how long?
10 days.
Okay.
So, and it's part of the initial steps. And then you file this labor condition application with the Department of Labor. You do these postings at the work site.
So we post for 10 days. Can it just be like post 10 days on your company website where no one goes to, or do you have to actually like 10 days on Indeed, ZipRecruiter?
No, it's not telling the whole world. It's telling your workforce. And so you can do 2 physical postings in conspicuous locations. Okay. So like most companies, if you're in person, have a wage and
like a bulletin board.
Yeah, or in the kitchen.
Okay.
But you can also do an intranet. So you're letting your workforce know on site of this. But for the PERM and the green card process, you are required by the Department of Labor to go through that active recruitment. So it's a genuine, bona fide, genuine good faith recruitment where you have to post in the state workforce agency. You have to post it in a paper of general circulation for 2 Sunday ads. So usually the Seattle Times, and then 3 additional recruitment steps, and then also on site a notice of filing. So you could do, and the excuse me, the additional steps are designated by the Department of Labor. So it's not like I can post anywhere. It's there's a list of recruitment steps you can take.
Yeah. So is like either for your law firm or like any of the nonprofit stuff, any committees or any events coming up that people should know about that they maybe might want to attend?
For the general public?
Yeah.
I don't know if any general
like any fundraising things coming up or just any events in general that people should know about and maybe go to.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on fundraising things. We just like I said, we just attended the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project Gala, but we're gonna pretty soon put out another sort of informational webinar. My partner and I, Amy Royalty, are going to talk a little bit about like beyond the H-1B, what that means for employers and foreign nationals who weren't selected in the lottery and are kind of like, we don't have another option.
Kind of limbo status. So to speak.
Like maybe there's a timeline they're up against where they're like, I have status and work authorization, but like, what are my next steps? How do I stay? How do I continue working? And we're going to kind of try to continue to put out those sort of informational videos and things. I mean, there's always opportunities to volunteer in the community. And
so how does one reach out to you and volunteer? Like what?
Well, I don't personally coordinate, but I would say looking at the nonprofits in our community.
And does a volunteer, is there some type of volunteer you want or like?
So, like where we volunteer are like with the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project or with the One America, like they do these citizenship day clinics. They're always looking for people to come help support, kind of, you won't be able to do the things that the attorneys or paralegals do, but even just being there to help coordinate day of is useful.
Like logistics or operations.
Yeah, there's always opportunities. Even at the neighborhood clinics, when I was doing those more regularly, people had to facilitate and coordinate and man the front desk. And so those were all volunteers.
Here's one I just thought of. So I definitely think this is one of those conspiracy theories out there. I think one conspiracy theory is that the Biden administration is bringing all these illegal aliens on over here so they can turn voters to vote him in the presidency again in the next election.
You can't vote unless you're a U.S. citizen.
That's what I thought, yeah.
And
Is there any can speed up the process or anything, or
so you, in most cases,
kill this real fast.
In most cases, yeah, you have to become a permanent resident first. And then depending on how the basis of that permanent residency. So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you can, and you continue to be married and live with that U.S. citizen spouse, you have a 3-year path to permanent to citizenship, to apply for citizenship. In most cases, if you've received your permanent residence, your green card through employment, it's a 5-year track. And so to be eligible to become a citizen, there's all sorts of other qualifications. It's not just biding your time. There's some physical and continuous presence in the United States. You have to show that, as a permanent resident, you can't just like leave and go live in your home country for 5 years and then come back and be like, hey, I want to be a citizen now. You have to show that the U.S. is your vital center of interest. Good moral character is one. You have to show good moral character. So if you were a green card holder and you were, had some criminal issues, those could prevent you from becoming a U.S. citizen. But once you're a U.S. citizen, you can vote. You have to register, but yeah, you can vote. There's not really a way to speed it up. There's some very limited, narrow categories that can slightly speed it up, where if you are, your spouse is a U.S. citizen and they're placed abroad, like military or certain provisions that allow it if they work for an employer that's engaged in like foreign trade and commerce, you can utilize some very niche provisions to perhaps naturalize faster, but again, very small percentage of that. But yeah, so it's pretty hard to
basically, if Jason Kavanaugh crosses the border today, I'm not voting in the election in 2024.
No, yeah, you're very unlikely to.
Why do you think that got out there like so crazy? It's like so many people believe that. It's all over, like people believe that.
I don't know if that has to do with people. I think there may be more questioning the voting places. Maybe they're not confirming.
Yeah.
Or doing the right things. I don't know. It's pretty hard to fake
insane.
it.
Yeah.
To become a U.S. citizen is an interesting process because, I'd say even people born and who've gone through the educational system in the United States might have a difficult time passing the civics exam to become a U.S.
I don't think I could pass it right now, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I always when I talk to clients, they talk about how they will, because they're studying for this test that happens the day of their interview, and they will go to work and quiz their colleagues who were like born and raised in the U.S. and they're like they can't pass.
They're like, I got a D in civics. Like, we didn't do this.
It's like
stuff.
History, civics. It's, you get up to 10 questions. It's all just, you're sitting across from an immigration officer and they're just reading them out to you.
There's no Googling it, nothing like that.
No, it's not like a multiple choice written.
No ChatGPT. What was this?
Yeah. You have to have 6 out of 10 correct. And then you have to pass an English exam too. It's reading and writing, but I'd say that's maybe like 1st or 2nd grade level. And there's some provisions that, can change that, but it's not a simple process.
Yeah.
Again, I think there's a lot of ignorance or perhaps just hearing things that they believe from people who are
doing their research.
Yeah. That make it seem so super easy to come in and get a job and oust U.S. workers and become a citizen and vote fraudulently. And it's, there's a lot of parameters in place and tests and requirements that you have to go through. And those who've gone through it can attest that it's a hard journey. And if you're from one of those countries with that huge backlog, it might take you 20 years to get there. Right. And so it's one of the most satisfying things that I do is being able to see somebody through that from start to finish. Like they'll come to me as a temporary worker and we'll get their green card. And then, another few years pass and we go through the citizenship. And so we kind of get to see them through start to finish to end that immigration journey and become a U.S. citizen. And I think those are sort of like my most gratifying cases where you're like, wow, I just saw you like get married and have kids and, like change jobs a bunch of times, start your own business, whatever. And you see this whole life,
What's the oldest person you've seen become a U.S. citizen? Like general number.
I'd say I think I've definitely done some citizenship applications for people in their 70s. I don't know if I've done anybody 80 plus.
Okay.
I don't think so. Not that I recall.
And so back to the H-1B visa, right? those at the 85,000 slots, is that broken down by states or just 85,000
No,
period?
it's federal. It's a federal system,
Okay.
so everybody's going into the same pot. 65,000 are for bachelor's degree or the equivalent. So you could be like have a foreign
Mhm.
degree that's equivalent to a U.S. degree, or have a combination of education and
So
work experience
not
that
broken up by
equates.
states, not broken up by
No,
industry. Okay.
no, it's not industry specific, not
Okay.
state specific. It's one pool, and then you have the 20,000 that are slated for people who have come here and obtained U.S. master's degrees.
Is there a separate program for people, let's say, have like a doctor degree in something in Moscow or India or Germany, or is that a separate program?
No, I mean, not as far as H-1B goes. There are there are different categories of visas when it comes to either non-immigrant or immigrant. So we call it like the alphabet soup when it comes to immigration. Like you'll hear these terms like TN, H-1B, L, F, M. Like, so it is really this alphabet soup of visa categories, and they apply differently depending on your eligibility. Some are specific to treaties that the United States has with other countries. There's like 5 countries that have, so Canada and Mexico are part of the USMCA treaty. It's called NAFTA.
Yeah.
So individuals get the TN through that. It's only for specific professionals in a list that's in the appendix of that treaty. Australians can get an E3. It's a specific, again, to Australian citizens, and it's for specialty occupations. So in terms of the requirements, they are similar to an H-1B. It's a specialty occupation for degreed professional, et cetera. But this subset is for Australians. Then there is H-1B1, and that's specific to Singaporean and Chilean citizens. And so, again, mimics the requirements of the H-1B in many ways, but it's a separate quota and those quotas, the H-1B1 and the E3s, those don't ever get exhausted, so that we don't see this lottery system that because then it's like, then you've got the H-1B for like everybody else, right? And so in that way, yeah, it can be, we don't have those other options for Indian citizens or Chinese citizens or, whoever else. Usually the pool of applicants is from across the world.
Yeah. Would you say coming from a certain country gives you advantage or disadvantage of the system? Like you might be like, if I'm presuming you're from Canada, you're trying to come from Canada versus like, I don't know, Rwanda from East African Canadian might have an advantage, or it's supposed to be all like fair across the board, regardless where you come from.
I think you have different options. Like if you're Canadian and you don't get your H-1B, you might qualify for a TN. And that doesn't exist for somebody from Rwanda. There isn't a treaty with that country in the United States giving this. And that doesn't mean that every Canadian can say, okay, I'll just get a TN, because you have to be in a profession that's listed in that treaty. And it's limited. It's, there's really nothing for like business or sales or any of those marketing. Those positions don't exist. So if you're Canadian and that's your field, then you're probably not going to get a TN. But, in terms of the wait time we talked about when it comes to like the green card path, because of the demand, if you're Canadian versus an Indian citizen or a Chinese citizen, where there are those larger backlogs and that longer wait time, yeah, there is an advantage. Your path towards permanent residency will be faster because there isn't that large queue of individuals waiting ahead of you. I mean, there still is a queue, but it's going to be substantially smaller.
Yeah, I know like a lot of people like with immigration, they're like, limit immigration. My thing has always been like, as a country, we ever get the place where people don't want to come here, that's where we should be rewarded, right?
And we might be getting there. I mean, I think that we're seeing a lot of people, and I've had clients who are here, we're on work visas, say, I'm done waiting. I'm done not having any security, and I have opportunities in other countries, and I'm going to go because, again, it's like, I mean, we can't imagine living in a country where every day you're like, this could all be just pulled, the rug could be pulled out from under me. I could get laid off and then I have to go back, and I've been here for a decade or whatever it might be. And so that it's exhausting to somebody, mentally,
Yeah, it has to be,
emotionally. Like, how do you plan a life? Like, after a while, you're like, I have a family, I want to buy a home, I want to do all these things, but like, is this all temporary, or can I be here for the long term?
So earlier when we first started talking, you talked about something that President Obama started. I think it's called the DECA of Dreamers. Is that still around? Because I know there's a big controversy a few years ago about that.
So initial DACA applications are no longer being accepted or allowed at this time. But if you have DACA, you can renew, and you can renew your work permit. But one of the big challenges, and this is, I mean, I think this is a big thing in Congress right now too, is the delays that we're seeing. So for dreamers that are,
and this is like a kid who was born here to legal parents, or
no,
what
if
is
you're
that?
born in the United States, you are a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
even if your parents were undocumented.
Okay.
We haven't gotten rid of that. I think in some of our prior administrations, there's been discussions about like, well, maybe we should change what it means to, but no, being born in the United States with some minor exceptions for like people who are here as diplomats and things like that and have kids here. You are a U.S. citizen, but there is a subset of individuals who came across, who were brought across by their parents, and they were children. They were, young children, and a lot of people some people grew up and didn't even know that they were undocumented. Like their memories in their lives
I heard
were,
a lot of stories of that. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm trying to remember when this was. I think this was in 2000, and I remember I was in law school, I think, or maybe I was just out of law school when the executive order came out. But it's a very specific time frame. I don't know off the top of my head. Like you have to have been physically present in the United States during a set time period. And then there's some other provisions about like character, like you can have certain criminal issues. But you can apply for, and you also have to show a certain education level, like you graduated from high school and things like that. But you can get a work permit and work in the U.S. And the and basically like it's a deferred action. Like they're not going to take any action against you. But right now, like I recently had individuals who were applying for like their work permit renewal, and it's taking like 120 days to get the work permit again. Some categories of work permits, the government has allowed for an auto extension. So like if you timely file for your work permit to be renewed before it expires, then your work permit is extended for like 180 days, or recently the government has extended to 540 days. DACA is not one of those categories.
Okay.
So if you have a work permit and it's expiring and you don't have another option, which most individuals don't, then you have to stop working or get terminated from your employment. And that there's this gap, there's this inconsistency. It's like, well, why wasn't it given to this? One, why isn't it moving faster? But two, if not, why can't we make sure that this category gets that auto extension? Because it's not their fault that it's taking a long time.
Doesn't seem American, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So, it's great. There can be more that could be done for those individuals, but that was sort of like one example of how an administration can effectuate change, right? Like can put in something that can help a big segment of individuals in any way, in some small way even.
So your clients or individuals, is that do you keep it strictly like the immigration stuff, or do you like help them find jobs, help them find support services if they need it, or is that totally different?
We don't help them find jobs. It's not really like a part of our process. We're their lawyers. We help them understand options, perhaps, and say like, okay, well, here's what's available to you. And like, of course, it's their job to find a position in an employer, and then that employer to sponsor them. As far as support services, I think a lot of immigration attorneys do. Yeah, they provide like, here's some resources for counseling services or, other things that might be needed. Probably the clients I work with, that's less common. But I certainly connect them as needed with other professionals if they need help. Like, oh, I need a tax advisor for international taxes, or I need an employment lawyer, et cetera.
So, Marsha, is there anything else that I asked you that I didn't, or anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. I feel like we covered a lot today.
Could be anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about my firm and sort of what we do, the kind of the types of clients we work with. It's really a large spectrum of types of corporate clients and families, and the pro bono work we do. I think we did a pretty good job. Yeah.
Cool. So before we get out, can you give us any advice or wisdom or anything you want to talk about?
Do you need some immigration advice? Is there anything that you want to ask me today?
No, not right now, but I'm definitely gonna get with you later. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, yeah, my general kind of goal is to kind of keep doing what I'm doing, help support businesses and families, and provide that sort of insight and guidance into the immigration system that I think is, I mean, if that's not what you do, it's hard to know, and it's hard to navigate. It's a maze of a system, and sometimes even we have a tough time navigating it. Sometimes even we hit those roadblocks, and we're like, hey, best I can tell you to do is call, talk to your congressperson, talk to an ombudsman at the agency, but it's a wait. I mean, so much of it is a waiting game, also, and I think that can be the most frustrating part for clients is like they're just so sick of waiting for the bureaucracy. And I mean, there's things that should be done and can be done probably to fix that, but it's also just the volume of immigration cases that's going through the system. And certainly COVID didn't help with that, right? I mean, that changed the world and in many ways, and certainly impacted our immigration system during that time when offices were closed, consulates were closed. And I think we're maybe just getting out of that now and starting to see that those backlogs getting, trimmed down a bit more. There are other ways that the government's trying to be more efficient. They've just started, this was the first year they ever did a stateside visa for a very select few individuals, where because normally to get a visa to travel, you have to leave the country, go to a consulate and apply. They did a pilot program this year. And this existed many years ago before I began practicing, but my colleagues that have practiced a lot longer than I have remember when you could get a visa locally. And they just implemented that, a pilot program at the beginning of this year for like a finite amount to see if we could start doing that again. So I think there's things that are happening, things that are changing, and it's to start our job to sort of keep abreast of it, let clients know, help them figure out what applies, what doesn't, where to use caution, where to prepare ahead of time, and then what to do if like you get targeted, you get an audit, the government's looking at you, and yeah.
Does the government ever ask like immigration lawyer firms like input on policy?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, like we definitely get so through I don't think they come to like a firm, but like through our Immigration Lawyers Association, through the Bar Association, we'll get reached, we'll have a government, like the CIS will have a ombudsman or a liaison reach out and say, we want to talk to stakeholders in this area. It's not just to lawyers, but stakeholders in general, and say, where do you need more support? Where can we do better? How can we shift things? I think they depend on that information too, to understand what's working and not working.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. Like we talked about with different administrations, we've seen varying levels of that communication. When the last administration was in place, those doors were pretty tightly shut and there was not a lot of communication or transparency given to us. And then as administrations shift, we start to see it's in all of our benefit to do that for the government and for stakeholders to be open and communicate, and everybody benefits from that.
And so it's the term is called immigration judge.
Yeah, and yeah.
And so are some immigration judges like known as like being like pro-immigrant, anti-immigrant, and are you able to like kind of like steer your client to the pro-immigrant judges versus?
No, I mean, so I don't practice in court, so I'm not the best person to ask those questions to. But no, you generally can't select
whatever judge you get.
Yeah,
you have to deal with. Okay.
Or it's
all right.
assigned. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Marsha, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. It was fun. I was a little nervous. I was like, I don't know if I'm cool enough to be on a podcast, but I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, you're very cool. And to our listeners, thank you for your time as well. Remember to be great every day.